The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spent a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, a group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont from nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, April 17th, 2025, and we have another eruption episode beginning on Kilauea. It began last night and is currently paused putting out a lot of gas, but we're kind of just waiting for the next chapter of activity here for this episode, Dane. Episode 18. How are you today?
Doing good, yeah. Just looking like a lot of gas, blowing not the ideal direction right now. But, last night had the buildup, had the spatter, got the lava flow coming out, and then kind of just petered off. So, yeah, we'll talk about that. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead and get them in the chat, and we'll be trying to answer them in our Q&A.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for that. Thanks for leading that discussion and collecting some of those questions. Here's another view from another camera that is available from USGS, and that's pretty fogged out, as you guys can see. So we'll keep an eye on this as we go through our update today. But to start, as usual, we'll get ready to do our volcano summary. All right, let's fix. All right, so yeah, all right. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano summary for April 17th, 2025. Kilauea began its 18th episode last night after a 1-week pause with a brief pulse of lava that emitted from the north vent. This is a live view of the current south vent on the left, north vent on the right, heavily degassing, but not currently putting out lava during this episode. Here's a view from the V1 camera from last night of the glow intensifying, and then the lava lake rising and spilling out about 100 yards onto the crater floor. And once lava leaves the vent, then that marks the beginning of the next episode. And so that was at 10:01 p.m. last night, Wednesday, April 16th. Here's a view from the V2 of that similar angle, just on a loop there. You can see that brief, it took about an hour and a half in total for it to conclude its activity there. And here from the S2 camera, showing the glow in the south vent continuing beyond that pulse from the north vent, and a continuing degassing from both vents throughout the daytime here. So that's the kind of activity we see as a first low-level activity, typical of several of the episodes we've seen recently. And what's interesting is that unlike the last episode, episode 17, which began to deflate as soon as it had low fountain activity, we have continued to inflate on our ground tilt monitoring data throughout that pulse last night, suggesting that there is still more to come. And what's interesting is that the last one also did not have a high fountaining phase because it began deflating immediately with that low fountaining phase. So we have not seen that occur here, and so it awaits to be seen whether we see a high fountaining phase and exactly when in episode 18. So here is our current notation in the USGS table, noting episode 18 and the beginning of intermittent low-level activity. And as they prescribe in today's daily update, they still expect the main lava fountaining phase most likely to start sometime between today and this weekend, with the possibility of more lava flows preceding the fountain phase. Earthquakes have been pretty quiet on the volcano. We just see our background south flank events and Pahala events for the most part here. There's not much more to highlight. Whereas we have had some VOG emissions with continuing degassing from these events from the volcano, and there have been lower level impacts of just the gas with less tephra, but still dispersing across the central and south and west part of the island here. There have been dominant trade winds at times, but as you can see, these occasionally variable winds mean that any high fountain phase to come may cause impacts to nearby communities with gas and tephra as well here. Currently, the impacts are just visible on our Purple Air Citizen Science Monitoring Network with just slightly elevated values, perhaps in the South Kona area here. Turning very quickly to Mauna Loa, it remains very quiet, very few earthquakes around the summit, and the earthquake counts are down overall since the 2022 eruption, as the volcano continues to recharge as expected here. And that's our Hawaiian volcano summary for today. So with that said, we'll turn to our volcanic hazards, and we'll show you a few of these cameras. So to start with, I'll show you guys the K2 camera. This is over Uikahuna, the former Jagger Museum site that's down here in the foreground. These are the bathrooms that are still standing over here in this corner. So when we play this, you can see the gas emitting from the vent for the last 48 hours and blowing mostly to the southwest. But here over the night, as you see the flash of glow, you do see the plume bending this way or that way or something like this. And those are those variable times. So let me play it one more time again. You can see that yesterday was more dominated by trades with the gases blowing off into the foreground. And here they are starting to vary around. And that's where we currently stand. So nothing else to see from that camera. We can go up to the flank of Mauna Loa, similarly for the last 48 hours. And there is that degassing with the trade winds blowing it this way, but then a flash of light at night, and then these variable winds coming in over the last 12 hours, 24 hours or so. And we'll show you one more. And what I've done here is take the whole last week of the S2 camera and just the daytime views. So let's play this for you guys. You can see that even immediately after the last episode, there's been a lot of gas coming out of these vents, more so than we're used to seeing in the previous inter-episode pauses. You can see that at times it's blowing off from right to the left of the screen there. That's more of that trade wind direction and off that way more so. But you can see here we end with this varying wind going over that V1 camera location, as we pointed out in our intro here. So there's a good amount of gas still coming out. We're expecting the post to come with the onset of high fountaining should that occur, as we still expect it to. And at that point in time will be when we need to be most prepared for that gas output and tephra output. Looking at the VMAP, VOG Measurement and Prediction Project from University of Hawaii at Manoa. Here is their VOG forecast dashboard. And you see, looking at the raw SO2 emitted from the volcano. Let's zoom it in a little more here. Impacts are mostly on Hawaii Island, but you see that we start off with the particulate cloud flowing to the southwest here. And that's where it typically goes around Mauna Loa and gets caught in the South Kona area and onshore and offshore that occurs here. But then when the winds shift to the south, then we can see it flooded into the saddle area or occasionally into Hilo or North Hilo area. I just see a couple of flashes of that occurring here during this forecast. And if we turn to the sulfate aerosols, so after more time, that VOG can kind of, I don't know, like distill a little bit there in the air and become more particles and less of the original SO2. And there you have that distribution, pretty similar, but maybe a little bit slightly further spread. And largely contained to Hawaii Island for now. We've seen some of the previous pulses when a lot of gas comes out, they can put a blast out that does affect other islands as well when we have these kind of winds, especially if the stuff's blowing this way and you have a much larger amount come out, then it can start getting that way to Maui and Oahu as well. But for now, if we look at our state air quality data, everything is in the green with the monitoring sites that are displayed here. If you can even see them. They are in green. Some more over there, yeah. Purple air. There's our South Kona area with a fewer of these elevated values down through here. Likely from just this ongoing degassing between the episodes. Although here we do have one site over here. What's going on with this one? At the campground, Namakani Payo. So that's where that VOG is blowing presently toward the campground there. Within a national park, let's look at their own air quality alerts. Looks like their campground monitor is offline right there, but all the other ones are in the green that are in service here currently. And looking at the charts, we can go back in time and see if there's been any spikes. Here's one at Kahuku Cross Fence, no indication of VOG reaching that sensor over there. But otherwise, it's looking pretty clean here. So let's largely because we haven't had the main pulse of our episode yet. We just had that one little brief one last night. So here is the buildup of the previous SO2 output from all of the previous episodes, still swirling around the Pacific Ocean here, and likely to get more intense when we have another pulse of gas coming out there. So that's our main hazard, is the gas and tephra here. And that's all we can really share today until it actually happens and something else occurs. So turn to the earthquakes, which are also quiet. This is a result of us having this open conduit, and whenever we build pressure, we just let it out through a little episodic eruption. So it's been pretty quiet since December last year, but here for the last week, we have earthquakes colored by depth. The blues are our deep Pahala zone here for the last week. We have a few of these south flank events, 2.5 and 2.2 there, and only a couple events closer to the summit there that are 1.9 and 1.9 as well. One deep one under Mauna Loa, one flank Mauna Loa, and one deeper under the west side of Hawaii Island here. There's really not a whole lot else to highlight with the earthquakes. If we look at the earthquakes by size here for the last week, the largest one was at 3.3, 20 miles down, almost 21 miles down, in this deep Pahala zone. So this is an area we think is being fed by the hot spot and has branches that feed each volcano, Mauna Loa, Kilauea, and Kama'ehua Kanaloa, formerly known as Loihi, offshore here. So that is as normal. I mean, it's kind of incredible to think about how this, weekly 3.3 earthquake now has become a normal thing for us to see, and occasionally we see the 4s and the 5s also, but that pattern of elevated activity in Pahala still continues, and we're still waiting to see what that develops into. But part of it could be this increased or sustained high volume of magma feeding into Kilauea that we're seeing, this whole caldera filling era of the volcano, where we just keep putting more and more lava into the crater and filling it more and more and more, and recovering some of that volume that we lost from 2018 when we had the summit collapse. Okay, so that's really all I have for earthquakes here. So we'll next turn to the monitoring. And just to start off with the first USGS status report that announced the beginning of episode 18 at 10:01 p.m. when lava overflowed from the north vent. They note that there was glow from the south vent. Well, so yeah, I'm not sure if here this is actually supposed to be south vent or north vent, but there was glow from the south vent as well. But spattering began at 10 to 20 seconds apart from the north vent around 9:10 p.m., with spatter bursts increasing in frequency and size until around 9:30, at which point there were up to 15-foot or 3-meter high dome fountains. So you could see them peaking from the cone there, and then as they were continuing filling that column of lava coming up, the pond itself became visible at 9:45 p.m., then spilled out through this north vent spillway out onto the Halemaʻumaʻu crater floor. When we look at the update that was issued this morning, they note that lava flows made it out about 100 meters, several hundred feet, or about 100 yards from the north vent before this ended at approximately 11:21 p.m. So, as we said before, the main lava pontoning phase is still likely to start between today and this weekend, with possibly more lava flows preceding that. They are now in the details of the rest of the update. There's a lot of activity. So here in the details, they're noting the significant glow from the north and south vents. That's something that they were noting ever since Monday, when in fact, on Monday night, they noted some spattering from the north vent as well. And that followed several days of darkness from the north vent, where it was really the south vent more consistently glowing following episode 17 there. So they note there significant glow with north vent minor spattering and overflows. They note the bursts of spatter every 10 to 20 seconds. And they also note the continuation of an inflationary tilt signal, right? Which was different than what you'd see at the episode 17 signal. They note the increase of seismic tremor. They note cyclic tremor patterns with 30 to 60 minute periods continuing that are suggestive of cyclic patterns due to gas pistoning seen prior to episodes 14 and 15, but in this case, longer period. So they've measured between the episodes this 1,200 tons per day emission rate of gas. Although we're seeing it pretty thick there, I'm gotta wonder if there's slightly more here since the episode began. And otherwise, that the Pele's hair is the main hazard around here. So there they are, and just still expecting high fountains. There's no other wording to suggest otherwise in here. And the only other note here is that the power system that supplies the webcams, KW cam, F1 thermal camera, and the laser rangefinder are still down and still offline according to the report here. So that leaves us with this timeline. 9-day pause there, and intermittent activity beginning 10:01 p.m. last night. So looking at our data streams here, our rangefinder is still out, no data here. Our tilt signal is still increasing. I guess this was as of an hour ago. I could reload this and see if it ticks slightly bit over, yeah. If we look really closely, it looks like there was a little drop down, like maybe a little earthquake or a step or some little event, but the main signal is still rising here very slightly. We do have these daily cyclic variations that are superimposed on that. Every single day you see that. Right? So it looks like there was a little bit of that happening, but it did step down here. But the main pattern seems to still be that of a slow inflation at the summit, while the rift is flat to deflating. So nothing exciting there either. Earthquakes, nothing really stands out for the last week. Earthquakes per day, pretty steady between 30 and 50 here. That's our background rates, essentially. And distributed across all the depths and the typical patterns here. Nothing really unusual to note. So there's the map again. Bigger Pahala events with that magnitude 3. You can see here a little bit of this kind of pulsing nature. You have one or more big events with lots of small events around it. Here's a bigger cluster. Here's a bigger cluster. You can see a little bit of pulsing happening down there. That's maybe the most exciting thing in that deep zone, the far left side of the graph there. And there's maybe that pathway that feeds to Kilauea, maybe something like that. One of them at least, because there's thought to be other ones that feed from other directions as well. So looking at the last month, we start to have some data streams added. I think that laser rangefinder for the last month is not getting plotted. Here is our pattern of dropping ground tilt during the episodes, and then recharge in between them, and then dropping during it, right? And then here we noted this one at 17 was a little bit slightly less steep because it began deflating at the same time as low fountaining. So if we had seen that again, then we might expect something changing more longer term, right? But as we noted last week, there are other historical records of having a lower activity event in between these higher fountaining events and have it just pick back up as before, or wind down. Either way was something that's been seen in the past. So we're still waiting to see what happens next there. That's the summit Wikahuna signal. Here is Sand Hill, both components, and showing a similar kind of step there as well. But if you consider this previous threshold where we were at episode 16, right, that could be one interpretation of where we are at this threshold of high fountaining. So we're getting pretty close to that up here pretty soon. But it's not how far we got during 17 when we had this abnormal activity for the pattern that was established before. So we came and exceeded that threshold already, and now we're up to this other one. And so that's interesting, and also maybe suggestive that we may have a higher fountaining phase as well. Earthquakes per day over the last month. Nothing really that interesting here, really. Most of these events were down in this Pahala zone. So there's not really much happening in the shallower depths of the volcano because of the eruption, relieving all that pressure, as we've stated before. And so here is how we can note that over the last year, earthquakes per week. This double column is the build up to the main eruption we have going now that began in late December. And so really those last couple weeks of December and all of 2025 since then have been pretty low counts across the board compared to what we've seen the previous part of the last year. It appears that more of the GPS graphs from the USGS are presently offline, so we're not going to be able to show any GPS today. Just presume that still fits in the regular pattern. And here's a bigger picture over the last 5 years of how earthquakes are low, earthquakes per month now, since the beginning of the year, compared to what we had for most of the last 5 years there. So that is our monitoring signals, and so we'll turn to our volcano watch at this point. And this is how to build a beach, Pohoiki growth over the years. And so it's interesting. We've been talking with the University of Hawaii at Hilo staff about Pohoiki, and looks like there is an interest there. And they were able to, they being CSAVE scientist Megan Decker and Liz Gallant, who is a faculty there and is previously from the HVO, still heavily embedded there, along with students Susan Rickfield and Lycan Forster, went down to Pohoiki and took their, where is it down here, ground penetrating radar to do a survey in Second Bay to study the internal features of the beach. So they produced, if you look closely, it's actually this little square right here is their data. And so it looks like a bunch of these lines. These are the reflectors of the ground penetrating radar as it was imaging the structure in that part of the beach there, right? So they fit this into a larger schematic where they show these different bedding planes where different layers of sand are deposited through different processes over time, put on and then carved out, eroded away because of that constant working by the ocean there. With the difference being that there actually are 3 different phases embedded here along that beach. That first phase was that high energy buildup when that first batch of sand was getting washed in and made a whole bunch of those ridges. And then the second phase coming in, continuing after that, but slightly less energetic with its buildup, and then an active phase being the one closest to the ocean now, where you have more of the seasonal carving and deposition back and forth across there. So this is awesome to see this, the nice cross-section schematic there, the hot pond, original slope down, and this is greatly exaggerated in the vertical dimension, of course, right? But it lets you see the structure inside of it a little more easily. And here is their map showing where their cross-section comes across, and the pre-eruption coastline from 2018 in white right up here. And then where lava flow came in yellow. And where that first phase deposited is everything towards the land of this bluish line here. And that's the first phase. And everything outwards, that's second and active phase there, right? So that first phase is a good chunk of what you see there.
Interesting thing to me about that first phase, the way they define it there, is that that's actually a really short amount of time that formation happened. It wasn't long until it was reaching around Third Bay from there. So we're talking a month, maybe, after into the eruption.
I think of it as really just the one storm. It was Hurricane Lane, wasn't it? That we saw that came in 3 pulses, right? And so it was really one storm. Yeah, also over the course of that month. But what they're looking at more is the structural, like the angles of the sand layer is getting deposited. So that manifests differently depending on how much energy is being. So yeah, that's why it's being separated, is because it's actually visibly looks different by being steeper and more energy deposition. So even if it was only one event in time, that hurricane with a 3, that's still notable structurally, as did a lot of work in that short time, for what you see happening here.
And then second
just
period,
part of that great unknown, right, of what happens if it scoops them out, because
then that second phase, throwing it out there, could have lasted a year even before transitioning into the third phase, which is that more seasonal. It's hard to be like, draw a line in the sand and be like, oh, this is when it started and this is when that's what it seems what they're trying to do, but that's really, just hard to do.
Well, it's a 3D structure, right? So they're just showing that along their one line, there is where the break occurs. And it's going to be like a 3D structure of like where the character, the nature of how the sand's getting worked is changing, basically, is what they're going for there. So yeah, pretty cool. There's some good details in here. So this is posted across our network. And let's see if I can find here. This seasonal reworking of sediment forms internal dune structures at Second Bay. They're composed of wind or water-driven particles that formed mounds, ridges, or hills. So they noted that much of the beach growth was a result of migrating dunes. The first phase dominated by primary dune structures built from a finer grain material created when 2018 lava flows entered the ocean. And I'll skip some of the lingo here. The second phase was continued deposition and sediment accumulation. The structures from this phase display cross-bedding, which are formed as dunes migrate due to erosion and redeposition of sediment. The idea being that as one dune is moving, the one that was there before was moving ahead of it, and so the sand underneath it ends up having an erosion of one leaving and another one getting put on top, basically, right? That's what we call cross-bedding right there. First phase dunes also have cross beds, but at a higher angle. This tells us the growth of the beach during the first phase was faster and more energetic than growth during the second phase right there. And the currently active phase of growth is characterized by stabilization of low-angle dune formation above sea level. That's essentially affected by tide changes. So they note this is just one moment in time, and dredging to restore access planned for later this year. The shape and structure of the beach will continue to evolve for sure. And so they're just trying. I'm really glad to see them getting involved down there, and also to have the students involved down there as well to be able to watch this into the future. So pretty cool. That's the Volcano Watch this week. And I will pause there and pass it over to Dane and Lou.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil. Let's go ahead and bring in Lou. Hey, Lou, how you doing?
I'm doing good. A lot of information there.
Right. It's cool to see them do something at Pohoiki, something new and relevant considering the dredges and the early processes and stuff like that.
And there's also the blessing that's coming up. I think I'm thinking that we're going to attend that one. You and I, we did Four Corners when they blessed that and started construction down there, and hopefully we'll be able to get down and do that down.
Also did Highway 132 back in the day when it got right after the eruption. And that one was when the rain cut the tape, the ribbon to let the road up, it started dumping rain and the rain just broke it. It was like, okay, road's open, guys.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. We got a lot of projects going on in Puna, don't we, over the next year or so. It's going to be nice to see what's going on and the progress. All right, let's jump into our community corner. So Philip covered all of our volcano stuff right there for the first half. Let's go and see what's going on inside the park. I do have some new information up there. Mauna Loa Road is closed from 4:18 to 4:27, 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. on those. I believe that's because of Mary Monarch. Try to slow down the traffic there. we have one of our most popular sites to check out if you're up in the park, the Wahine Kapu up there, Steaming Bluff, to see if it starts growing. If anybody goes up there and would like to share a picture on Hawaii Tracker, I'd appreciate that. The overlook remains open, but a small area around the vent is roped off for safety. This is what's going on right outside the park. Power line work, tree work is being done. There's construction going on. Inside the park, we're going to cover what's going on with the roundabout coming up shortly. Once that really goes into full motion, once you go in the park, there's going to be a new roundabout created right there. So there's going to be a lot more traffic congestion, especially now that we're having these episodes weekly. So be aware of what's going on inside and outside the park. I guess that's technically still in the park, but outside the main gate area. If you've got pets or you like to drink water, make sure you bring your own. There's limited areas where you can purchase water. You might be able to get some out of a sink somewhere, but bring your own bottled water up there, refillable, especially for you and your pets. There's a view and area map I still have up on there, and I also like to emphasize the closed area. Philip was talking about the VOG impact. It's an actual serious thing here, and cruising in some of those areas is not recommended, and it is prohibited. So pay attention.
And
Here
just
is
one that's out there, right there. Go back one.
Yep.
Those Uikahuna and KMC overlooks. If this wind direction continues and it starts, fountaining, I would not be surprised to see those get closed. It happened a few episodes back. We have precedent for it, and those winds right now do not look friendly.
Agreed on that one. If you have any questions or concerns, stop at the Kilauea Welcome Center at KMC just to find out what's going on. You'll know if it's closed because you can't go any further. The yellow gates come out right there. But Dane's right. Pay attention to the VOG up there. This is a look at the Kilauea Visitor Center that's under construction. Yvonne sent me this picture earlier today, and you can see that I didn't realize they were tearing out the bathrooms to build this pavilion as well. So there it is. And here's a shot that I took 2 weeks ago of them already framing it up. So they're making progress. This is a big project up there, and it's halted all the programs inside the auditorium for After Dark in the park. But there is other stuff this week going on. There's KMC and the Kilauea Military Camp, which is now the Welcome Center. You can check that out. Get that information about the VOG right there. And this week is coming up as National Park Week. It's Free Saturday coming up. National Park Week is April 19th through April 27th, starting with a free Saturday, April 19th. This was interesting. What songs remind you of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park? Tune into your top 10 parks on social media for an earful this week. Dane, do you have a song that reminds you of the park?
You would have had to told me this beforehand.
Nope. You know me. I come in.
You have
come
to
in
think
cold
about
on
this type of one. Bruce Springsteen. I don't know.
All right. I threw all these different parks in here as I was reading this. It was just clicking in my mind, not just Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, but all the parks that I've been to. And this is just a couple of them that I was just clicking on. And there are so many great national parks in the country that no matter where you're listening to this from, you probably have a park in your state. Go check it out because they are fantastic. And I love when I was doing this, all the memories of all the times with the kids, my wife, all the trips we went around the country to see these parks. So it's a free Saturday. Go enjoy it. There's an event at the Kahuku unit, painting workshop with Zuni Pueblo artist Lakin Epalus. I hope I pronounced that right. It's a painter and cultural bearer of the Zuni tribe and is April's artist in residence. Lakin works at Grand Canyon National Park in the cultural demonstration program. This is an interesting one because reservations are required with a 20-person limit. I have the email there if you want to get in on that. That's Saturday, April 19th. It's 4 hours. If you're an artist, it's a hands-on presentation. So check it out. That's down at the Kahuku Visitor Center. Life on the Edge is still going on. I'm still waiting for somebody to send me some pictures or tell me a story about it. I have pretty much dedicated myself to going and doing it, and just to get some experience. I think it's a great program that the park offers, especially since you're going up there to see what's happening with the episodes. Spend an hour with one of these rangers. That's at the Kilauea Welcome Center.
You should do the full experience and also take the Haleon bus up there.
Oh, you would love that. How long do you think it takes to get from Hilo to the park? 3 hours?
That'd about be a good over-under, I bet.
Ooh, I don't know. I drink too much water to sit on a bus for that long. That'd be a problem. Second annual Hula is Life celebration on 4/22 at Nani Mau, starting at 5 p.m. Experience the magic of Hilo-style vibes with live hula music, good company, and onopupu plus drinks. It's $30. It's Tuesday, April 22nd from 5 to 8 p.m. Supports a good cause. A lot of hula going on this month, as well as it is Tsunami Awareness Month at the Pacific Tsunami Museum. And they are open weekends 10 to 2. And I have one more piece in here for us. We worked on getting out an eruption email notification. It's stay informed with the HVERI's new eruption alert system. Timely email when eruption and high fountains occur direct to your inbox. You can go to our site, hveri.org/subscribe. And you can see right there, you can hit the general HVERI subscriber list to get our newsletters. And then we have a volcano eruption notification on there. And yeah. There we go, Dane.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, we'd also like thank everybody that tuned in today. You know, the likes, subscriptions, the shares, all that stuff, just being here, any comments, that all stuff helps. And with the algorithm, I know I say it all the time, but it is true. And we're trying with all the different platforms. So we appreciate your support there, as well as everybody that has made donations. We do take donations on YouTube, but we encourage them over on hveri.org/donate. Happy to have either. We did have one come through from Dawn who said $5 Kilauea will erupt again on Pizza Friday tomorrow. It's maybe. Thank you there, Dawn. Continued support. We also like to thank they're on screen there for a minute, but the Kilauea Recovery, the Puna Strong, and the Buyback Grant programs through the County of Hawaii, as well as the Hawaii Community Foundation, for making this program, as well as our digital resilience and youth development programs, have the support they need to continue operations.
Yeah, we do have one more donation that came in on our site from Mark Hardman for $52.34. Thank you, Mark, longtime supporter.
All right. And yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Lou.
You're welcome. I'm gonna think about this song for the park.
And you can listen to it while you're on the Haleon.
You got
all
it.
right. Well, I'll get Phil back in here. Talk to you later. Good to see you. Welcome back, Phil.
All right. Yeah, interesting. You guys are giving the county a hard time here, huh? Will you pull it off of there?
Can pull it off. All right.
Your presentation is what I'm talking about, Lyric. I can't.
Oh, pull it off.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
All right, there we go. Yeah, so I was just going to show you this here real quick. The Route 11 line express from Hilo to Volcano leaves Hilo 4:40 p.m., arrives Volcano National Park 5:50 p.m.
An hour?
Yeah, just a little bit over an hour.
Not a lot of. That's a very cooperative traffic day at 4:40 p.m. to get from Hilo to Volcano.
Oh, well, there's the schedule.
I don't know. I'm just saying, I would be stoked to make it from Hilo to Volcano.
Until you can present me evidence to the otherwise that it takes longer than that, then, you can go do your field research there. So anyways, we'll do some observations on Kilauea that are not just the bus, but let's turn back to our cameras here. There's the V1 wind direction changed just in the last 30 minutes or so. So here you see it blowing away from the camera now. Still nothing red visible in there. And there's a V2 camera. There's north vent and south vent. The south vent less visible from the previous camera there. And looking at the current webcams, there's the S2 camera. Similarly, just showing degassing. The B1, there's the sun setting towards the west behind the plume, which is blowing towards the village, it looks like, across the crater into the park here. B2 a little closer in. You see that from a little bit closer to ground level. There's the gas plume once again. Nothing really visible in the static right there. The tower. And there's the gas and nothing really visible from Mauna Loa. So those are our live webcams. We'll come back to these views here at the end, but we do have a photo release from the USGS from this past Tuesday from Summit drone flights, unmanned aerial system flights, UAS here. So these are interesting. Let's go through the handful of these we have. Looks like there's Mike Zoller from USGS getting ready to launch the drone with all the permits in place for the national park. That is in every caption here. That's the only way to do this is through that cooperation and permitting from the national park. So there it is. They have not only the pilot, but observers. And there's the drone in the air right there. And they're on the edge of the crater, keeping visual on it at all times there. They noting that they're collecting aerial imagery and gas concentration data during the flights. So that's what they're really doing there. That's great to see. They hover over, this is the south vent, and are looking down into that inner pit. So there's that edge of the main cone there, the cracks with the slumping slivers of cone here, towards the center there. And then the very center, this smoother lava covered rubble that funnels into this deeper hole that's right there in the center. Pretty interesting to see that there. They didn't really see any glow at the time here. They're low level oblique aerial view, no active lava, but it's showing vigorously emitting gases, and in their thermal images, it was glowing hot. So there is the south vent, and similarly, they flew it over that way to the north vent, and that is this image right here. So there's that big patch of sulfur deposits on the edge of the cone there. You see this flatter pad of lava at the bottom, and then right in there's a little bit of orange glow visible through all the fume. So maybe it was that little bit of spatter happening still from the build up to this episode that we are currently waiting to reactivate. So that's it. This was taken on Tuesday. So since then, this is where the lava rose up through here in a fountain and filled this whole thing with lava, drained over the spillway out here, and then likely subsided and settled once again to get us to this view that we're seeing here in the V1 camera, where you can't quite see the floor in there right now, but you do see these fuming spots on the wall. So there's our north vent there. And one more, and that's here from the side, from the actual rim, looking at the craters. There's our S2 webcam, I believe, is that one right there, looking over. This is one of the favorite spots. One interesting thing here is, see if we can go forward, right down in here. Like this little patch of red might be all that's left of that June 2023 cone that was at one point against the wall of the crater. And as the crater is filled in and it flares outwards, now it's not against the edge anymore. But the lava that's filled in and raised the ground level has created this extra gap to the wall as well. But I think that's all there is. Looks like it's about to go all the way under here. where that'll be completely buried by this new activity. And so you can see how it really drapes up the wall there. It's like this big blanket, the material plastered up there, collecting more and more to kind of smooth that out to a nice angle of repose. And of course, on top, you can start seeing these layers up there as well, collecting in the rim. And it's maybe worth looking at too, how thick that's starting to look up here too. Speaking of dunes and crossbedding, that kind of thing can occur in this situation as well. Were you to dig a trench through this pile of tephra on the downwind side of the vent. So let me scroll down here to the actual vents themselves. There's a south vent. You can kind of see this flattish part right there within the inside. And north vent is just behind it. It looks almost like a bump on the side from this angle here. But I point that out because here in the caption of this one, they note that they have been measuring the height of the crater wall behind the vents using a laser rangefinder. And the distance between the lowest part in the center of the south vent and the lava flows at the top of the crater wall is approximately 150 meters, 492 feet on April 15th, 2025. With every episode, this measurement changes as the cones around the vents grow with new material added to them. Photo by Katie Mulligan. So 150 meters, 492 feet. That's this distance from there to there, right, to the rim now, right? So about 500 feet. So for a 5,000 foot fountain, or I'm sorry, 1,000 foot fountain, we would need to double that. And you'd need to see the fountain shooting that same distance above the rim as below it from the current elevated base level from where it was before, the result of the previous 17 episodes. So that's the photo release from Tuesday. And then we have our little pulse. And so I thought we would also look at the S2 camera, just the nighttime view now, starting back last week, right after episode 17. We see a little bit of glow from the vent there, from the slumping walls, and this is really the south vent starts glowing first, then the north vent comes in more intermittently. South vent gets brighter, north vent spills out that flow, and then everything goes darker again until it resumes here tonight. So one more time. Here's going to be the glow from the south vent. Zoom it in for you guys. South vent there, north vent, and here it's going to spill out at the end of this week sequence there. So yeah, not a whole lot so far, but that's what it looks like over the course of a week. There's the V1 camera for that full last 24 hours. Some of that degassing, glowing, and then the lava flow rising, spilling over, still glowing there. Camera moves, of course, in these V1 and V2 views. And here's the V2, that full 24-hour sequence as well, with the degassing in the afternoon, dark at night from that angle, that distance, and then that pulse of lava, and then dark again. And light and still gassing, degassing quite a bit there. Here's the S2 for the last 24 hours. We looked at the winds in the daytimes before. We looked at just the glow at night, but there is the combined version for the last 24 hours there. And how the winds have really been swirling this morning towards both of the cameras in every direction there. From Volcano House, zoomed in view from the National Park camera. So there's our fuming vents. That little burst, which it looks really fast here because I'm speeding up through this time lapse, but it did last that bit over an hour last night. The B1 camera, another more distant view across the crater, so maybe what you might see from some angles of the national park. Let's play that one for the last 24 hours. There's all the gas up there, the glow, that little burst of lava, and very largely contained to that one little corner of the caldera. And unlike the later stages of these episodes when lava will flood further across the crater floor, we haven't seen much of that yet in the first night. So one last camera for us to check out here. That's the B2 camera. Here's the last 24 hours just to start as well from that ground level. The glow, the burst of lava, and the quieting afterwards and degassing. Thus far, remember the volcano is still inflating, so we expect more to come still, but that's all above the surface to be seen. Now, I was curious about this last week. So for the last week, took one image a day from noon for us to see if this crater floor is moving. And so I'm going to loop this, and this moves pretty fast, but this is the whole last week looped into this half second, repeating itself. So hopefully you can see what it looks like, this bulging, almost like if you look like right in here, that inner part looks to be sinking while the rest of it is bulging upwards here, right? So this is the last week with only one very brief pulse of lava. And what we're seeing is that lava, as it's filling the volcano, is actually actively injecting below the crust here in the eastern segment, even between these episodes. Right? So that's pretty interesting to see it move this much. We don't always see this. That's something I think would be interesting to track further, right? When do we see it, and how do the episodes vary with that association? But right now I can just show you that sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And for the last week, it certainly was moving and in the build up to this episode. Not huge amounts, but clearly you can see it wiggling right through there. And you can zoom it into this one segment. And here you can see that. Looks like I'm losing, like the ground is dropping in right there almost, right? With everything rising around it. Kind of trippy. So that's the B2 just for the last week. And if you're curious about the importance of this process, we've seen it over the years now, but here is the B2 camera back from when it was first installed and available. That turned out to be right after the September 2023 eruption began, a down drop block over here on the right side of this image. So it's actually some active lava, and that's some of the first few frames here. So I'll play this, and the first thing you see is this movement and subsidence in the east from that eruption in 2023. And we're zooming through 2024 now. July, August, September, October, and December is when our eruption starts. So here it comes. And here comes our crater floor rising, partly through flows, but partly by being pushed upwards from below as well. I'm going to pull it back here to just this most recent eruption, 2024. There it goes, one more time. And you can see that considerable rise in the crater floor, partly through injection and partly through repaving from above as well. So that's an important detail happening there still. And that really is the end of the observations that we currently have for Kilauea, apart from continuing to check back over here at these cameras and see if anything has changed while we talk. So we'll finish it off here with a short volcano awareness presentation. And what I wanted to do is to come back to Kīlauea Iki. We've talked a little bit about Mauna and Pu'o'o episodes in the past. So what this is an image from professional paper 1350. The only thing I've done here is flip this fountain height so it actually is getting higher upwards, which normally they plot it the other way here. So in red is a fountain height in meters. They were calling it phase, episode 15 and episode 16 here. Right, there's all the different plots. This is the tilt that we're used to seeing, similar to what we see. So you see the tilt dropping and then recharging, and then dropping and recharging. That's our similar pattern. I have some other funny stuff happening in there as well. There's other signal we won't talk about today. But that's what you'd know to compare. This is the tilt rate change, how fast the tilt's changing. So, and then the tremor that occurred there, right? So what we're really interested in is 300 meters is about 1,000 feet there. And so there is that record high fountain, is that one right there that occurred on December 17th, 1959. Right there, looks like right around between 1 p.m., right in that time around 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. or so, somewhere in there. We'll get the detail right here in a few minutes. So what you can see is that both episode 15 and 16 of Kilauea Iki, they began. Well, actually, they began slow. So here's the beginning of, if you can see this little tail at the very beginning here, that starts off episode 15 before it ramps up very quickly and then crashes down quickly and stabilizes after that. Right. So, but what you're seeing is this trend of similar to what we're seeing now, a low level activity to start, then a peak in fountaining within the first pulse of it, and then a stabilization at a lower level. And so I feel like I have not plotted any of our fountains from 2024-25 in this fashion, but just visually watching them and seeing how high they get and how they come down. I feel like this is the kind of pattern we're actually in right here. So pretty similar. And if we come over to episode 16 of Kilauea Iki, we see a similar thing as well. Not quite as much lead up, but that sharp peak to start, stabilization. In that case, it dropped down and stabilized at a lower level a second time. So there are certainly some variations that can occur there. Right. So let me come to the chronological narrative, which is this is USGS professional paper 537E. This is the Kilauea Iki paper summary, right? So here's where we can get the actual text of each of these episodes. So 15th phase, December 17th, 1959. So after the end of the previous episode, 7 hours later, at 11:10, spatter was once more observed in event. And for almost 2 hours, a small fountain bubbled to heights between 25 and 50 feet. So for us, it's similar to what we saw during 2025 episode 17. During this time, at Kilauea Iki, a small stream of lava drained from the lake into the same conduit from which the fountain issued. And since they actually have a picture of this over here, I'll just pause and come over to show you this image right there of that low fountain right there with that stream of lava draining back into the vent, because in this case, it was erupting into this smaller closed crater and filling it to above the level of the hole where it had a chance to pour back into the hole when lava was not actively pushing out. So there is that first frame right there. At 1:53, December 17th, lava began to surge from the vent. And 12 minutes later, so that will make it 2:05 p.m., this culminated in an awesome and terrifying 1,900 foot high fountain. The large amount of pyroclastic material, this is the Pele's hair and tephra, produced by this huge fountain deluged the area around the vent and cone and generated a dark, turbulent dust cloud that clothed the ominous spectacle in the crater in swirling darkness. I'll just pause there for our interpreters. This is a little bit more poetic paper they were writing back in the 60s and 70s here. I'm not sure how that quite translates, but so this is the most interesting part here. The fountain remained high for only a few minutes. By 2:10, it had decreased to heights ranging between 500 and 700 feet. Right, so if you look at it there, by 2:10, and we said it was 2:05, it really lasted 5 minutes. 5 minutes. We talk about this record fountain of Kilauea Iki, and part of the motivation to talk about this is, well, we've seen 1,000-foot fountains in 2025 now from Halemaʻumaʻu. What might happen if we had a 1,900-foot fountain? What would the impact be? How would that change the impacts that we're seeing, right? And one key thing to realize is if and when they get that high, they don't usually last very long at that height. And I'll show you more about this shortly with all the different fountain profiles. But that's the key thing there. It was high for only a few minutes and decreased to lower heights within 5 minutes there. So that upper photograph, 1:45 p.m. This was actually 1:45 p.m. right there. And they noted how it was really by 2:05 p.m. that the fountain got really high. So here, this lower image is at, is there a time here? 10 minutes later, so 1:55. It's still growing up to that larger height right there. But there it is. Just 10 minutes later, how much it changed. And then here they have 2:05 p.m. the 1,900 foot fountain as seen from the Uekahuna, where the HVO building used to be. In this case, they say the top of the fountain is inside this pushed up cloud bank, deflecting the cloud, interestingly there. And tremendous quantities of pumice rain out of the dark cloud and are right at the fountain. That's all this dark fallout over here in the downwind area. And so I do have one other image of this here. This is a different, slightly different view. Slightly different time. That cloud bank's not quite pushed up yet there, but you can see that. You can see a red about as high as there, actually, right? And see how dark this cloud is on the downwind side of that. There's Kīlauea crater profile right there with Barron's Ledge in the foreground here. So there's that. Yeah, that didn't last very long. Both of those images from within that 5-minute window. And oh, too soon here. So, and then they note here this last image of the set on an afternoon on a road just below what's now Pu'upuai. This is the Pu'upuai end of the road currently now. It still hasn't recovered from that event and the one that followed. But immediately after that 1,900 foot high fountain, note large masses of spatter lying on the road. So here is the road. Look, there is the big chunks of lava that landed here on this road from that high fountain that was shooting up twice as high as before and after in that area, and all the trees. This is why it was called Devastation Trail originally, before all the leaves grew back and everything recovered, which is why it could also be thought of as a recovery trail nowadays. So, all right, that was the subsidence back down at 2:10, right? 30 minutes later, at 2:41, the fountain, still pouring large quantities of lava into the lake, began to surge. As we see with many eruptions, we see this kind of surging toward the end. And for about 45 minutes later, at 3:32 p.m., it stopped. For about 1 minute before the fountain died, the lava lake drained back toward the vent, and so on and so forth through there, things collapsing, and the end of that episode there. I'll just skip through because I want to just point out the similar pattern in the 16th phase there. So in that case, for 20 minutes, it was a small boiling fountain. Then over the next 25 minutes, it built up to 1,500 feet. So not quite the record, but still pretty dang high. And on from there as well, right? Just to kind of show you this idea of how it ramps up. Great quantities of lava poured over the base. A new flow covering the whole surface within an hour. But here, after cresting at 1,500 feet for a few minutes, the fountain subsided and played to heights of 400 to 800 feet until the cessation of activity. So in both cases, it's like that first burst out that reaches that great height. And then you see both 15 and 16, just a few minutes. And so that's a little bit more about those fountains. And so without getting into more details of the sequence there, just a note, their 17th phase, the very last one of Kilauea, in that case, it continued for a little bit more than 11 hours. No large fountain developed, nor was there significant lava extrusion. It was mostly a degassing event, reworking the lava that was already erupted in the lake. So there's the high fountain once again. And here is all the episodes. So episode 1. So what I try to do here is to scale it. This is November. This is November 15th, all day, 24 hours, 16th, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So the first episode scaled here for how long it took. It lasted about that week right there, right? All the other episodes were all about a day or slightly longer in the case of episodes 3 and 4, right there. I've tried to scale the fountain height about the same as well, so you can kind of see this 300, that's that 1,000-foot threshold. It's close to where the top of this is right here, right? So we're interested not just in what's 1,000 feet, but what's peaking to these extra record heights as well. And you can see that there's really nothing in the first few episodes doing that. Episode 4 was longer but lower for that entire duration. Episode 5 got a little bit higher, exceeding 1,000 feet. We'll zoom it in for you guys there. There's a 300. So that's about 1,000 feet there. Phase 6 did not quite get to that. Phase 7 did, after low level activity to start as well, and it starts to show this peak at the start and downward progression. There's phase 8, low level activity for quite a bit longer in that case, ramps up to peak early on, not at the very, very beginning, but with a slight delay, and then decreasing once again. There is 9, shorter activity to start, more steady the entire time, right there. So you see this interesting development of patterns. And so here, episode 10, we start to see a peak. And actually, this one has a second peak there. Phase 11, a peak to start, and then dropping down. Phase 12, a peak to start, and dropping down. Phase 13, right? Maybe you have a better established system where you can be building up enough gas pressure to really, when you start the fountaining, you have this extra potential energy to blast this extra tall fountain as well. So there are 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You see 15 just happened to be the tallest point right there, but it's the same pattern as all the other ones in the same week, right? This is December 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. A little bit longer gap between 15 and 16, which had that last 1,500-foot fountain before it also dropped back down right there. This is a little bit more about the pattern, and just so we can be better informed when we see what happens or what could happen. And to help us compare a little more, I thought I'd bring up the Pu'u'u eruption as well. It's got these similar kind of graphs. So this here is the beginning of the eruption, and Pu'u'u's episodes 1, 2, and 3 were not actually high fountaining events. We didn't have Pu'u'u yet. It was still bouncing around in different locations. So, but just to show you guys, there's 100 meters, there's 200 meters, and so everything is pretty low and bouncing around for episodes 1, 2, and 3 here. And we'll just, there's one, so these data gaps are just area places where they were not able to record the data because of rain for the most part, or fog, or something that would have blocked the time-lapse camera they had recording to get this data from here. So I'm really curious about the taller ones. So 200 feet, 200 meters, everything's under 200. Everything under 300 here, getting a little bit closer to the 1,000-foot threshold that we're still really building up. And so let me keep going here. Episode 4, slightly taller to start, decreases, but still under 100 meters. Episode 5, pretty low the whole time. 6, a little more, decreasing pattern. 7, pretty, maybe a slightly decreasing pattern, but pretty stable across the board there. Coming down to 8, like these early phase Kīlauea ones, actually kind of growing in fountain height before it shuts off. 9 reverses it, coming back down. 10, several peaks starting and stopping, but overall coming down. 11, really steady and low. 12 coming down. You see, it takes a long time to really break that 1,000-foot threshold for Pu'u'u. There's 13, 14, keep it going. 15, there is 1,000 feet. We finally broke it, episode 15, just like in 2025. And you can see that in this case, they're peaking early, coming down, second peak, coming down. Our own episode 15 of Kilauea in 2025 had a peak at 11 a.m. and at 1 p.m. So maybe it was something like this. Something like that, right? There's 16, similar double peak at the start, with other ones embedded in a decreasing pattern. 17, 18. 19 was a low volume one from Pool that had 4 shorter puffs with low level activity in between that we talked about last week, just 100 meters. 20 goes back over 1,000 again. And to wrap it up here, I'll just show you all the rest of them together, 21 through 47 there. So you can see these patterns. They're tall and coming down. And there's an upper peak coming down, another peak and coming down. One almost picks back up. That one's short, starts and stops pretty quick. But now these later episodes are getting a little bit more consistent with that pattern there. There's another one that gets a little more stuttery. Double peak on that one. More low level activity preceding this one, and then less of a drop off. Right, so you see a lot of variation still, but you still see ramp up and drop off, ramp up and drop off. Just to compare against what we're seeing today and what we saw at Kīlauea as well. Right, so in all, we probably are seeing a pattern of the tephra and VOG dispersal that we expect to have the greatest cumulative impact. And maybe occasionally for a few minutes, we might have this extra blast that might put extra stuff further off, right? I think what we saw with the tephra during episode 15 and the south winds actually hitting the highway with all that debris, that might be the worst that we've gotten so far as impact there. So that's where I'll stop with this little foray into Fountain Heights. Mostly Kilauea, but a little Pool for comparison here as well. And yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, very interesting there, especially with the episode 15, being seen twice. It's kind of interesting. I know It's just coincidence, but there's a little bit something to that. But we do have a couple questions here for you, if you're ready for those.
All right.
So we have one that's very similar from Victoria, and here we go. How long can we expect those episodes to keep happening? This seems new to how things have played out over the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, that's a great question that we wish we had a crystal ball to know the answer. And we don't know the answer. And that's part of why I'm presenting all these different scenarios of data. So we have some kind of context to everyone can have their own guess. And that might be an educated guess if you are listening to all these details, I suppose, and not just a shot in the dark. One of the interesting things that we couldn't show you the GPS this week, but we're seeing that equilibrium state of the volcano where whatever it swells is able to relieve through the eruption, and it's been in that state since about episode 4 or 5, we'll call it, somewhere in there, right? So maybe since January sometime. And so that's one part of it, right? So that we have a system right now where we're able to kind of keep things stable, what comes in and gets out. The big question with Kilauea is always this issue of who's driving the car, as it was once put in the USGS paper, right? The two big factors are magma coming in, the volcano swelling and filling. And the second is the south flank of the volcano, which is on that southern edge, moving toward the ocean. And at its northern edge is the rift zone and that whole summit complex of the Kauai Reservoir, South Caldera Reservoir, and a summit as well. So the south flank borders all that stuff. And if that flank is moving to the ocean, if it's the one in charge driving the car, per se, in this analogy, then it's pulling open space. And by pulling open space, it makes it hard to keep an equilibrium because you have to keep filling more magma to account for the extra space that's generated all the time, right? So that's the other part of this whole issue is what's the south flank doing? And we're actually seeing reduced activity in the south flank. It seems like there's fewer earthquakes. There's still some, but I haven't seen the GPS from there reliably, but I would suspect that it's still moving slower than before this eruption began. And possibly since all the way back to the Nepal eruption in September of 2024, which the research that we saw presented at the American Geophysical Union conference, Chapman conference in Hilo that happened and was it February? Was it February? Yeah, I think it was in February. They discussed how there is this 14-year cycle in that Middle East rift zone by Nepal that leads to intrusions or eruptions within that 1 week of time every 14 years. And our eruption this past time did that, hit that within a week to erupt at Nepal. And after that happens, the south flank stalls for a little while. So we're in this magic space of the south flank is not moving very much. It's stalled, maybe because of it was able to erupt at Nepal and it's recharging. And the pipeline into the summit is stable and things are balanced that way. But at some point, it's inevitable the south flank will move again. We'll start moving further. And at that point, we'll start making more space. That's going to throw off the equilibrium. And then you're going to have to change how your eruption goes, right? So it cannot last forever is what I'm getting at here.
Right.
How long that takes to happen, that's a guess, right? Could that could happen through one big earthquake tomorrow, or it could not have a big earthquake and it could take months or years for it to do
That's
that.
what I want to ask about then. Just follow up with the south flank pausing or stalling, and then the idea of it, getting going again. Is that increase the chance of one of those bigger earthquakes that we've seen, like in 75 or something along those lines?
I don't think the big one quite as much. I think the big ones we see more so when the rift zone is more pressurized, right? So like in the lead up to 75, for example, we'd had from 1969 to 74, the Mauna Ulu eruption, feeding lava into the rift zone for a long continuous time, kind of charging and filling and pressurizing. Then it gave way, right? For 2018, we saw it filling from Halemaʻumaʻu, possibly from as early as 2008, filling until it finally gave way in a big one. So it's usually at the end of the cycle of building and filling that it's going to let off the big one, not at the beginning of the cycle, right? One thing that's interesting is we haven't seen slow earthquakes in the south flank, not like a similar movement of the land that occurs over 24 hours rather than in an instant. That's what we call a slow earthquake. It happens geologically fast still within 24 hours, doing all the same amount of work, but you don't get all the shaking, right? So we haven't had those happening either. Maybe we'll start having those. Maybe we'll start having more smaller events and build our way up to actually showing the GPS move. And the GPS moving is something that I wish I could show you better right here, but that is a weakness currently in the public data being displayed. I don't have it to show you.
All right. Well, I think that does it on my end. Good work. And yeah, we'll see what happens tonight at this point. If you want a notification, if it does start high fountaining, make sure to sign up for our newsletter. Just put that on screen one last time, hveri.org/subscribe, and you'd select the volcano eruption notifications to receive those. Still looks like the gas is not going in a favorable direction.
Yeah, I'm not looking too good for those northern overlooks, but if you're on the south side or on the east side, Volcano House, Kupinai Pali, that might be the angle to aim for if you're going to take a chance and see what might be happening tonight. I would expect some strong glow once we see it get dark, at the very least here, but we will see.
Would be an interesting, time to go up there and see what happens if you are going to go. But watch out for traffic and potentially places that get closed if it does go off and the winds are not cooperating.
Yeah, watch out for parking, bring your protection, right? If you are going to be in an area and the winds are variable, it's possible that they could shift and you might have a rain of Pele's hair and debris. So, things like hats or coverall, things that cover all your skin. I heard about some people bringing umbrellas and being questioned, and they're like, well, hope we don't need them, but if we do, we'll tell you why.
I don't think glasses are a bad idea either.
That was actually,
something, because any eye protection is probably better than none type of thing.
Yeah. That's a two-way sword there. I'll mention, if you have your glasses on already and you don't take them off, that's great. If you take them off and you put them down and the Pele's hair falls in the lenses and you put them back on, that's not going to be good.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't stop falling, or sometimes it kind of comes in turbulently. So definitely protect yourself with that. But all that said, everyone enjoy the show. Hopefully there's something to see further here in the next day and further. And we will recap what happens in a week's time, next week on Thursday at a regular time. Anything else, Dane?
Nope, that's it. Next week, unless something big happens, another eruption, a new episode, we're just going to put out a post on Tracker, and you can look for a post on all of our socials. But besides that, next week Thursday, 5 p.m.
So I'll clarify, right? Like, so this is all the same. It's still eruption still, or this is just the newest episode. If there's a new eruption, that would mean a different hole somewhere else. It would definitely would.
I did clarify myself. I did say episode.
So new eruption, yes. New episode, no.
Right.
Just for those guys keeping track on your bingo card at home.
All right.
Mahalo, everybody. Thanks, Dane. Thanks, Lou on the back end, and thanks to our ASL interpreters, Daniel and Carrie. And until next week, the nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Our mission is to improve preparedness through education. So until next week, aloha, everybody.